What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you. In today's video, we're going to be going over 5 players that are bust-proof for 2021. Now, obviously, we could consider injuries a bust. Every player, of course, could get injured, and some players on this list have been injured in the past. But, of course, barring injury, these players have such significant roles in their offense and will be featured in 2021 heavily. So, outside of an injury, these players are virtually bust-proof. Before we do get into the video, though, just a quick shout out and reminder that if you do enjoy these videos, you can definitely show your support by hitting that like button. Only takes a moment for you, but greatly helps us out in growing the channel. Currently, we're on the road to 100k subscribers. Our goal is to hit that by the start of the NFL season, which is just a little bit over a month away. So if you're new to the channel, maybe you haven't subscribed yet, definitely take today as an opportunity to do so. Also, guys, be advised, our draft packages are available now. Those can be found at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So if you want access to our tier-based rankings, risk ratings, sleepers, targets, busts, player projections, video player breakdowns on the top 150 players, access to our private community group, and more. Once again, you can access that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link for that, as always, in the description box below. With that being said, though, it's time to hop over to our stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which quarterback threw the most incompletions in a single game last season. The correct answer was actually Justin Herbert, coming in with 27. Congratulations to Ryan Mag, the first to get this right on YouTube. And as for Twitter, @_Hoddard. Once again, congratulations to both of you. But as for today's stat of the day, 2 quarterbacks last season threw for 3 or more touchdowns in 8+ games. One of those quarterbacks was Aaron Rodgers, but who was the second player to accomplish that feat? Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Alright guys, without further ado, it's time to get right into the video, and as per usual, we'll begin with the player listed on the thumbnail. That's right, Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Amari Cooper is coming off of a pretty successful season, all things considered. In 2020, he finished as the wide receiver 15 in PPR leagues. That was on the back of 130 targets, 92 receptions, 1,114 receiving yards to go along with 5 receiving touchdowns. Anybody out there who's not really considering that a successful season definitely has to take into consideration the fact that Dak Prescott was injured so early on. For the remainder of the season, Amari Cooper was dealing with, at best, Andy Dalton at quarterback. So for him to come out and finish as the wide receiver 15, that really shouldn't be taken with a grain of salt. Now heading into 2021, we do have Dak Prescott coming back and presumably healthy. All reports that we've had so far throughout this offseason is that he's ahead of schedule. Rumor even has it that if the season were to start today, he would be fully healthy, or at least healthy enough to be the starting quarterback for that Dallas Cowboys team. How much of that is exactly true, or how much of that can be contributed to coach speak trying to keep a positive situation surrounding the upcoming season, it's really difficult to say. But one thing we do know is that if he were behind schedule, we certainly would know it. With his injury happening so early in the season, it's more than likely that he is at least on pace to start the season. Remember, this happened back in week 5, or at least that was the last time that he saw actual playing time. So even though his injury was more on the serious side, we should still rest assured knowing that most quarterbacks in his situation would be able to return healthy to start the beginning of the season. That is going to be a positive note for Amari Cooper and his fantasy outlook for the 2021 season. But we already know, even without Dak Prescott, if Amari Cooper does have to play with the backup quarterback in this situation, then we at least know Amari Cooper has a floor around a top 20 wide receiver. Currently, Amari Cooper is coming off the board as the wide receiver 14, and I get that a large portion of it does have to do with the emergence of CeeDee Lamb, which does call into question his target market share compared to previous seasons. But one thing that we know is even with CeeDee Lamb fully healthy and on the field, playing on the second highest percentage of slot snaps in the 2020 season, in that situation, Amari Cooper was still remaining the top target in this offense, an offense that actually ranked first in passing attempts, a factor largely placed on the back of their defense, which is once again coming in very suspect for the 2021 season. So for the odds of them to be top 5 in total pass attempts once again, I'd say the odds of that happening are pretty solid. If Amari Cooper does remain the top target by a pretty significant margin on an offense like the Dallas Cowboys, which is clearly an offense that will be in scoring position quite frequently, then Amari Cooper is a receiver that still brings in top 5 upside. And if he hits his floor, let's say CeeDee Lamb is heavily involved in this offense and they're more splitting targets rather than Amari Cooper having a heavy lead in this offense, then I say you're getting a receiver that's playing at his floor with Dak Prescott healthy. That means I do believe he can still finish as a top 15 wide receiver, being drafted as the wide receiver 14. And this is also a player I just got in the Scott Fishbowl in the 5th round, which is a complete steal. He's falling in drafts heavily. So if you're looking for a safe player to target in the early rounds and you want to err on the side of safety, maybe you took a more high risk pick in the first 2 rounds rounds, then look for Amari Cooper in your 3rd round. He's falling to the 4th round, and he definitely is one of the most bust-proof players of 2021. Alright guys, we're moving into the next player on this top 5 bust-proof player list, and it's going to be a player I really haven't brought up in any video so far this offseason. Player I'm talking about, of course, is Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. Right off the bat, I can hear 2020 Joe Mixon owners cringing at even hearing the thought of Joe Mixon being a bust-proof player. Owning him last season definitely didn't feel like you owned a bust-proof player even while he was healthy. In 2020, Joe Mixon only appeared in 6 games, receiving 119 rush attempts on the ground for a mere 3.6 yards per carry, converting those 119 attempts into 428 rushing yards. And in the receiving game, he did get a slight uptick in receiving volume, 26 targets, converting 21 of those into receptions. Pretty respectable catch rate there, but only 138 yards. But he did score 4 times across 6 games, also posted double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his 6 weeks, including the game that he was knocked out due to injury. He still posted double-digit fantasy points in that game, and even showed how high his ceiling can be, posting a 40-plus point game in the process. Trust me, I can hear you 2020 Joe Mixon owners, and knowing how frustrating it was to own him. I was a Joe Mixon owner in one of my leagues as well, so I know it was pretty frustrating at the early portion of the season, busting in his first 1 of 3 games, but he really came back. Post week 3, he could really be trusted in fantasy lineups and was only given an opportunity to play in 3 more games before getting injured and out for the remainder of the season. And a large portion of the reason why he felt like a bust came to his high draft cost. His high draft cost is not going to be an issue heading into this year's draft due to his injury and subpar performance at the beginning portion of the year. Joe Mixon is a player that's also falling in drafts and being a bit undervalued. If Joe Mixon was even able to perform as well as he did last season, then where he's going in drafts wouldn't be considered a bust whatsoever. Currently, he has the ADP of the running back 13 for 2021. This means drafters can actually nab Joe Mixon as their running back 2, albeit a high-end one, but believe me, if I ever were to leave the draft and I have Joe Mixon in my RB2 slot, I'm going to feel really darn good about it regardless of who my RB1 is. Like I had mentioned, if his production was even on par with what he did in 2020, you would be getting a steal, but there is reason to believe that he could even see improvement. For starters, with the injury to Joe Burrow, it's very likely that this offense functions more heavily on the short passing game, getting the ball out of his hands quicker. This means for an offense without Giovanni Bernard, Joe Mixon is going to be in a situation where he's much more heavily involved in the receiving game. We saw that uptick in receiving production at the beginning portion of last season, and that was of course in a year where the team did have Giovanni Bernard, and this year the team will be without that player. On top of that, the injury to Burrow not only improving the amount of volume he's getting in the receiving game, it also means that they are going to have to rely more on the run game. What better way to alleviate pressure on your quarterback than having a solid run game to complement the pass game? It's going to keep these defenses honest, keep the chains moving, and if they're successful at that with their improved offensive line, Joe Mixon could flourish in this offense, even being a top 6 option for fantasy football. That is going to add to his potential ceiling, but if I'm drafting Joe Mixon, I'm targeting him as a high floor running back 2 option, and where he's currently falling in drafts, I consider him not only a fair value, but one of the safer running backs to choose in this range. Alright guys, we're moving into the 3rd player. It's going to be bouncing back to the wide receiver position. It's Atlanta wide receiver Calvin Ridley. With this selection of the next player being Calvin Ridley, there's no real need to harp on him all that much. I think we're all in agreement that he's going to have a phenomenal season, largely on the back with him being on a team like the Atlanta Falcons, a team led by a quarterback Matt Ryan, which has absolutely no mobility, relying strictly on his arm, which is what makes him such a disadvantageous fantasy option at the quarterback position. But for any receivers in this offense, a la Kyle Pitts, a la Calvin Ridley, possibly Russell Gage, that should all be great signs for their fantasy value moving forward. Julio Jones is no longer in this offense. Julio Jones is a receiver who even last year in an injury-riddled season commanded 68 targets. That's 68 vacated targets that are going to be spread around this offense. Looking back at the 3 seasons before that, he received 157 targets, 170 targets, and 148 targets alike. Clearly, the receivers on this team are in line for heavy usage. We got a glimpse of exactly what that meant for Calvin Ridley last season. In 2020, with Julio Jones in and out of the lineup, Calvin Ridley finished as the wide receiver 5 across 15 games, receiving 143 targets, converting 90 of them into receptions for 1,374 receiving yards to go along with 9 touchdowns. I would be completely shocked if he wasn't able to match or exceed that production, so you're talking a receiver who we strongly believe has a floor of a top 5 wide receiver, barring injury of course, and if we're talking ceiling, a reasonable expectation is the wide receiver 1 finish of all of 2021. For that reason, it really shouldn't be surprising asking why we have Calvin Ridley ranked as the safest wide receiver heading into the 2021 draft. He was listed as one of the safest players to target in the 2021 season, didn't fail us, now has an even better situation heading into 2021. You'd be silly not to target Calvin Ridley in any opportunity you got. Currently, he's coming off the board as the wide receiver 4. We have him ranked as the wide receiver 3, and it's obvious, barring injury, that Calvin Ridley is legitimately bust-proof. Alright guys, we are going to head into what I believe is going to be the most controversial player on this list. I think the running backs are definitely holding the weight of the controversy in this video, but you know we have to keep it interesting, so the next player up is Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks. Right off the bat, the elephant in the room, I understand Chris Carson does have the moniker of being an injury-prone running back that is on the back mainly of his really harsh running style, very physical. We see him taking really hard hits, fighting for those extra yards, and it's really putting a lot of tread on his tires despite him being a relatively young running back. My goal in this video was to kind of throw the injury concerns to the side, not completely though. I wouldn't say that Chris Carson is doomed or destined for failure or destined for injury, of course, which is why I felt comfortable enough to include him on this list. Why I consider him though a bust-proof running back outside of injury though certainly has to come with his command for the touches in the backfield and the competition for targets in this offense behind him on the depth chart. Currently behind Chris Carson on the depth chart, we have options like Rashad Penny, who carries a questionable tag to this day. Behind him we have Travis Homer, who is a relative nobody, and then behind him we have DJ Dallas, unproven as well. For the fact of the heavy draft capital invested into him and the fact that he's on the last year of his contract, we would strongly suspect that Rashad Penny would be the running back behind Chris Carson. And is there really any other running back in the league that instills less fear in your heart for losing snaps than Rashad Penny? So if we don't have any depth chart concerns, then we have to look at the offense and see if there are any concerns there. And no, definitely not. There's an offense led by Russell Wilson, one of the most elite fantasy quarterbacks, but not only that, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league, meaning whenever this team has an offensive opportunity, they're moving the chains efficiently and getting themselves in scoring opportunities quite frequently. It's one of the reasons why Chris Carson, who only played in 12 games last season, was able to score a whopping 9 times. Very impressive numbers, especially considering 4 of them were through the air. Even though Chris Carson only played in 12 games, last season was one of his most efficient for fantasy football, finishing as the running back 19 through 12 games on the back of 141 carries, 681 rushing yards, running at a rate of 4.8 yards per carry, so extremely efficient, one of his most efficient of his career. And in the receiving game, he saw the most volume ever, finishing the season with 46 targets. Previous career high was 47. In that season, he received 1 more target than he did last year. He also appeared in 3 additional games. So we're seeing while he's on the field, Chris Carson is being used more in the receiving game, and that's something we should continue to expect due to his success in the recent seasons. Considering Chris Carson is on one of the most safe offenses, has a stranglehold on the touches out of this backfield, and has been trending upward in his usage in the receiving game, and there have been reports that this offense and coaching staff wants to run the ball even more. Whether it's a rumor or not, we can't say for certain, but it's undeniable it does increase his ceiling. If I'm drafting Chris Carson, it's not really as a ceiling play, it's more for a floor play. Not to say he doesn't have that weekly high ceiling, but he definitely has one of the safest floors of any running back being drafted in his range. Currently has the ADP of the running back 18, which blows my mind. Through 12 games last season, he finished as the running back 19. That was through 12 games. He was a top 10 running back if we're talking fantasy points per game, so if he does perform as well as he did last season, you're getting a complete steal where he's going in drafts, and I definitely consider him bust-proof barring injury. Alright guys, we're moving into the final player on this list. We're jumping back to the wide receiver position, and this is going to be a player that I have not brought up once this offseason. It's Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers. I do want to preface this by saying Keenan Allen's not really a player that I've been going out of my way to target. He's been a player that if he falls, I feel comfortable taking him where he's going in drafts. I think he's a fair value, but not screaming value because he's such a high floor player, but going to have a difficult time reaching his ceiling. Looking at last season's production, it's easy to see why. Last season, he finished as the wide receiver 14 with 147 targets, converting 100 of them into receptions. We're talking triple-digit receptions here, so heavy PPR target in that sense. But unfortunately, his yards per target, very short. We're talking 6.75 yards. 100 receptions only resulted in 992 receiving yards. But if we're going to pump him up, we do have to give him a bit of props for being a more red zone threat, coming in with 8 receiving touchdowns in just 14 games, easily his best output of his entire career. Heading into 2021 though, what makes him so safe definitely has to be that he's one of the lone targets that they found success with in the LA Chargers passing offense. Keenan Allen last season was a player I was avoiding because we were starting the season with Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback. Yes, of course they drafted Justin Herbert, but we really weren't sure if he was going to be a bust or if he was going to be successful. Fast forward to the following offseason, and we know Justin Herbert is a stud. Not only did he put in a very respectable fantasy season, finishing as a top 12 in fantasy points per game, but even more impressive, he posted posted one of the best rookie seasons of all time in the record books, and that should not go without noticing. Like I had mentioned though, Keenan Allen was one of the lone players in the offense that had been playing consistently, somebody that Justin Herbert could rely on, and with Justin Herbert heading into his second year, there's some room for growth, and any improvement in Justin Herbert's efficiency is going to directly translate to fantasy points for the most involved receiver, Keenan Allen. Looking at competition for targets in this offense, it's really difficult to find some. Outside of Austin Eckler, they really didn't have much success with the other receivers on this team, the other two main options being Hunter Henry and Mike Williams. Right off the bat, they let Hunter Henry escape in free agency, definitely the more successful receiver out of the two if comparing Hunter Henry to Mike Williams. Obviously, big body tight end, superior red zone threat, so Keenan Allen, who is more efficient in the red zone in that area of the field, there is reason to believe he could see even more red zone opportunities in 2021. Regardless though, Hunter Henry still leaves behind 93 whopping targets that he had a season ago, so those 93 vacated targets will be spread across the other receivers, and with Keenan Allen having a stranglehold of the receiving production in this offense, it's a virtual guarantee that he's going to see an uptick in volume as a direct result of Hunter Henry exiting in free agency. Outside of that, the only true competition is Mike Williams, who I do think is a great late round pick, especially if you're looking for a player with upside. Mike Williams being that high yards per target player, deep threat in this offense, I could certainly see him playing a major role. So if I'm in the later rounds and looking for an upside pick, he's definitely a guy I'm always looking out for. If I'm looking for Keenan Allen in the early portion of the draft, I'm not really looking for him for his upside, more his safety, because barring injury to him, Keenan Allen proving to be healthy ever since he had his freak injuries at the earlier portion of his career, and barring an injury to Justin Herbert, there is absolutely no way I can foresee Keenan Allen busting in this offense. Justin Herbert is not afraid to throw the ball with high volume. Keenan Allen is just too heavily involved in this offense to fail, so I consider him a bust-proof player that you can be targeting in the early rounds. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hope you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.